Hey everyone, welcome to Taji's World of Books and welcome to another book review video. Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to do a book review video. Just be prepared. Let's buckle our seats. I'm going to be rambling. I'm going to be all over the place. As you can see from the title, I dove back into Cassandra Clare's The World of the Shadowhunters, and I read Chain of Iron, but in order to read Chain of Iron, I needed to go back and read the Infernal Devices series, and in order to do that, I needed to do some other stuff. So, I have to say, you guys know I love dark romance, you know I love a good smutty book, but I also really appreciate good writing. And let me just dive right in and say that Cassandra Clare knows how to write a good angsty book, and she knows how to write a love triangle, and she knows how to write dynamics amongst characters and depth amongst characters, and you don't need a lot of smut, and you don't need a lot of shock value. She just writes really good storylines for me, and I really appreciate the world that she's developed for the Shadowhunters, and I absolutely, hands down, love it. And so I am going to get into Chain of Iron. This is going to be a spoilery video, so if you haven't read it, you know, I'll try to let you know that I'm going to spoil as best that I can, but just know that going in. Okay, so let me first start off by saying that I have already, because I've already read, you guys know, I've already read the Shadowhunter books, and I really love them, and I love the world that Cassandra Clare has built. So I went ahead previously, long time ago, and purchased this book, and it's an illustration, and I absolutely love it because it gives you the illustration for, and it tells you in the beginning, so you've got it for the Infernal Devices, The Last Hours, The Mortal Instruments, and Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. And then the Dark Artifices. These are like all the trilogies or series that are in this world. And I loved it because I went back and read the Infernal Devices to prepare for this video because I wanted to make sure that I was really prepared. And then I was also buddy reading it with a friend of mine, and she's never read it. So I was like, you know what? Let's just read it in terms of the timeline that it occurred, because she didn't really want to delve into the world of the Shadowhunter. So let me preface before I even get into this. Let me say that I think that the best reading order for the Shadowhunters, and to understand the world of the Shadowhunters and to be prepared for everything that's going on, is to read them in publication order. Read them the way that she put them out, because that's how, you know, you get the best understanding of the world of the Shadowhunters. I personally read them, I read the Dark Artifices first. So I read that trilogy first, and then after I read the Dark Artifices, I was like, wait a minute, there's another world out here, let me go back. And so then I went back and read them according to publication order. But you can read the Infernal Devices first, you can read the Dark Artifices first. If you want to go on Cassandra Clare's website, any of the books that are listed in purple are the ones that you can start, but you can basically start anywhere. But I am a stickler for like knowing storylines and plots and not getting spoiled, so just read them in publication order. But for the purposes of this video, I reread them by reading the Infernal Devices, Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, and then Chain of Gold, and then Chain of Iron. Okay, back to this. So I love it because as I was reading, not only did I have the family tree by me, but I also had these books, this book and these pictures. So then when we were talking about Alexi de Quincey, or when we were talking about Axel Mortmain, I was able to like go through and see Charlotte Bromwell, like what she looked like, the Dark Sisters. I just loved it. And then it goes right into, from there, then it goes into the Last Hours. And then in the Last Hours, as we know, that's what we're reading right now, Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron, and then it's going to be Chain of Thorns. You know, you got to see Alistair Carstairs, and so on and so forth. So I really, really appreciated it. So I would really highly recommend picking this up if you haven't already. Okay, I'm not gonna go into great detail about the Infernal Devices. I'm just gonna say that the first book in the series is Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and then the final Clockwork Princess. This is set in the 1850s, late 1800s, And this is our first sort of introduction to the world of the Shadowhunters. And the Shadowhunters are a race of Nephilim that are descendant from the angel Raphael? Angel Azrael, I think. They're descended from the angels, and they basically are fighting a war amongst demons that occurs in the normal world that we live in, but they're basically shadowed or shielded from the world that we live in, so we don't see them. So anyway, so the world of the Shadowhunters is one in which they're fighting this war against demons, and they basically are stronger, and based on the marks that are put on their body, it gives them agility, it gives them strength, it gives them memory, it gives them the runes. So the runes that are put on their body are basically allows them to, operate at a higher level so that they can fight the demons off. So this is, like I said, set in Victorian London, and this is with Tessa Gray and with James and Will Herondale and James Carstairs, or Jem. And so what we find is that there's a relationship called a parabatai, and the parabatai are a stronger than blood relationship. It's a platonic love, and it is like the most powerful relationship that any one person can have with someone else. It's stronger than marriage, it's stronger than a familial bond. It's very, very powerful. Okay, so when we're introduced into the story, Will is a shadow hunter, and Will is fighting against evil, and he comes across Tessa. We don't know what Tessa is, but Tessa is being held by the Dark Sisters. She's being taught to shift into, she's a shapeshifter. She shifts into other people, or whatever she touches, she can shift into that thing. Will sees her, he basically rescues her and brings her back to the London Institute, or the enclave. So in the European system, it's the enclave, and in the American system, it's the clave. So he brings her back to the London Institute, and they basically take her in, and the story develops from there. And so I'm going to say that Cassandra Clare developed an epic love story in this book. I have never read this hits the crescendo of love stories in terms of love triangles, in terms of love, loss, broken hearts, dynamics between characters. The first time I read this, and I said this is all going to be spoilery, so if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead. The first time I read this series, I was really pissed at Jem and upset that he didn't see what was going on, and I really was rooting for Tessa and Will, and I was all there for Tessa and Will's relationship. The second time I read it through, I have to say that I focused much more on on Jem's relationship with Will, and the platonic love that they had for one another, and how strong their bond is, and how much they truly cared for one another. I have to say that this book 3 broke my heart. I was sobbing through this book. I have never read a book that is more powerful than the dynamic that is written and the love that exists between Will and Jem, and between Will and Tessa, and between Tessa and Jem. It is just powerful. Cassandra Clare knows how to write a book. She really is one of the best authors that I have ever read, for my taste in reading. And I love that at the beginning of each of the chapters, she gives you a passage from Lord Byron. She gives you a passage from John Milton, Paradise Lost. She gives you a passage from Alfred Lord Tennyson. She gives you passages from Oscar Wilde. So given the fact that this book is written for a younger age range, I feel like she's really introducing that population to beautiful classical writing. And we know that Jem loves the violin, and Tessa and Will share a love for poetry and for Charles Dickens and for Hemingway. So they are avid readers, and she's introducing young readers to the beauty of the classics in a really subtle way. So I thought it was really well done. Okay, so there's so many different dynamics I think I love in, and I'm not going to continue to hold these books up, but in that series where you've got, you know, the Lightwoods, we're getting introduced to Gideon and Gabriel Lightwood. I love that we see the dynamic between Charlotte and Henry, whom are married, and we see these groups of friends and couples and relationships and the forefathers of the future, or the future of the generations of the modern day Shadowhunters that we currently know and love, like Anna Lightwood and, you know, Ace and Clary and the Fairchilds and, you know, and the Blackthorns that are currently, that we see in the Dark Artifices. So I love that we see this whole dynamic. And so it is, and then you get to see what's going on with the Inquisitor, and you're like, why are the Inquisitors all so evil? Like, you know, in the Dark Artifices, the Inquisitor, which I don't remember who the Inquisitor was at that time, but he was evil. And like, and we see the Inquisitor that is currently in the Infernal Devices, he's awful as well. And so you get to see a lot of dynamics, and as you develop, Cassandra Clare leaves a lot of Easter eggs in these books for you, and it's best to read everything because plot lines are fleshed out, Easter eggs are left for you, theories are out there, like you can pick apart and you get to see, oh, that's where that started with Annabelle Blackthorn. Oh, you planted the seed over here. Oh my gosh, you're the forefather of these folks over here. So like there's a lot of, she ties the world in really, really, really well together. Okay, so having said that, we need to make sure, and that was the other thing, this is the only other book that I read that I had to sit down and I developed my own family tree because I didn't want to look at the family tree that was online, even though Cassandra Clare says that the family tree that was listed here in this book is not the accurate family tree and don't go according to it, even though it gives like a little bit of spoilers. And so I was like, I want to stay away because I don't want to be surprised. Okay, so then you need to know, coming out of this, right, out of the Infernal Devices, that you've got Sophie and Gideon, right? And Sophie and Gideon then have children, and their children are Lightwoods, and they are Barbara, Eugenia, and Thomas. Then Cecily, who is Will's sister, she then is with Gabriel Lightwood, and their children are Christopher, Anna, we love Anna, and Alexander Lightwood. Alexander's the baby. So then Charlotte and Henry, right? And Henry is the one who developed portals. So we see portals later on, but he develops it along with Magnus Bane, which gets revealed, which I love. Okay, and I told you, spoilers. So Charlotte and Henry have Charles Fairchild and Matthew Fairchild. Will and Tessa get together and have James and Lucy. And then Elias Carstairs, who reveals himself at the end of this book when Jem becomes a silent brother, Elias tries to give Katana to Will and Tessa, and Will is like, absolutely not, that's the Carstairs heirloom, it stays in the Carstairs family. He walks away. Tessa says to Elias, no, absolutely not, that maybe what you need to do is keep that for your own children, and once you have children, then pass it on so it stays within the Carstairs family. And it's the same katana that we see in the Dark Artifices. Okay, so Elias and Sona have Alistair and Cordelia Carstairs. And then on the Blackthorn side, you have Tatiana Blackthorn. She has a son, biological son, Jesse, and then she has an adopted ward named Grace. Okay, so knowing all these players, then it's important. We get introduced, go and research which of these stories, because not every one of these stories are going to make sense if you read them now, but there are certain ones that are essential that you read out of here that introduce you to, for example, to Alistair Carstairs, that introduce you to Thomas, that introduce you to Christopher, that introduce you to Charles and Matthew, that are here because when they all go, because when Shadowhunters become of age, they go to the Shadowhunter Academy. So many of the things that happen here, when you see over here why they behave the way that they do, it all happened in this book, and so it's essential that you read that. So if you want to go in terms of, you know, chronological order, how things happen on a timeline, you've got the Infernal devices. Then you go into the stories when the kids go off to the Shadowhunter Academy, and a lot of drama happens over there. And then once you finish with the Shadowhunter Academy, then we get into Chain of Gold. And in Chain of Gold, we now see that all these kids are of age. And we see that Christopher, for example, works very closely with Henry because Christopher has the same proclivity as Henry Bronwell. Henry is like, you know, he's an egghead, right? He's very sciencey based. He's like gonna do tinctures. He's gonna do experiments. And so Christopher wants to work with him in that way. Okay, so what's happening over here? So we see in the Chain of Gold that Cordelia Carstairs, right? She is being introduced. Her father is accused of committing a terrible crime. So they travel to London with the hopes of like preventing the family's name, you know, to be ruined. And so then she's introduced. They know each other because they have, you know, their homes in Idris or whatever. They've, you know, been around each other for many, many, many years. And I think, you know, it comes out later that James really started to fall in love with Cordelia when they were 14 years old. So they've known each other forever. So she is determined that Cordelia is going to be accepted. So Lucy and Cordelia are friends. Lucy and Cordelia are supposed to be parabatai. So they start to work together, you know, to really help her to train and to introduce her to London society. We also see in Chain of Gold that there is a continuation of Tessa, with Tessa's grandfather being a demon, because that's how a warlock is developed. So being a demon mixed with a shadow hunter, but a shadow hunter that doesn't have any marks, and so we don't know that the shadow hunter is in fact a shadow hunter, if that made any sense. Okay, so then there's a continuation of Belial and what he's doing and how he's manipulating things. And so they're all sort of working together. We also see that, you know, Tatiana Blackthorn, who was really pissed off over here because of what happened to her husband and what happened to her father, she's holding a grudge. She then takes on the ward of Grace Blackthorn, and things are happening throughout this book with James, and it's really, really heartbreaking. And at the end of this book, this is where you see that in order to, Cordelia is really starting to develop feelings for James. She really cares for them. They're all working together as a team. We see at the end of this book where, in order to protect James, because James is under the spell with this bracelet, and we know that Grace has put this bracelet on James and really manipulated James and is making James feel like he's in love with her. And Cordelia's heart is breaking because she sees that he is hopelessly and irrevocably in love with Grace, but Cordelia is loving him. So we see a love triangle as well. The reader knows that this is not real because this bracelet is a magical manipulation. And so Grace manipulates James into burning down the Blackthorn home in Idris. He does it. They are all called to council, and as a result of this, that it's going to come out that James in fact burned this house down, and Cordelia steps up and says, no, he didn't. He spent the night with her. So in Victorian London, this is a no, because her reputation is going to be soiled. It's going to be ruined because nobody's going to ever marry her because of what she's done. And so as a result, James says, I'm your friend, I care about you, I'm going to step up and we're going to engage in this fake marriage. And we're not only going to engage in this fake marriage, but we'll do this contract for 1 year, and at the end of 1 year, then we'll be able to divorce, you'll be able to remarry, you won't be ruined, and therefore, you know, you will be okay. And so we are left at the end of this book feeling like we've gone through all of this drama, all of these things. You know, there was one point in which Grace took the bracelet off and James was freed from the curse. We thought that was going to be a happy end ever after ending. We thought it was going to work out, but it absolutely just turned out to be heartbreaking and terrible, and you're invested in these characters, and I absolutely love this book. This is a 5 out of 5 star for me. Okay, so then we get into the Chain of Iron, and I'm trying not to be on here for like ever and ever and ever because I feel like I told you I was going to ramble. Let me first start off by saying that this is the most angsty book I have ever read. it is the most frustrating book that I have ever read. The dynamics in this book are very reminiscent of the dynamics that occurred in A Clockwork Prince. Whereas here, I walked away feeling heartbroken and heart-wrenched and just devastated. And the whole series, I just was absolutely devastated. Whereas here, I walked away feeling pissed off and angry. And so, boy, where do I start? There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of things that could have been easily resolved if James would have just acknowledged that he sees and recognizes the things that he's saying are hurting Cordelia, but he doesn't resolve them in the moment. Every time you get to a point where you think things are going to get resolved, there's an interruption. He says, I'll do it later. He doesn't actually step up and take care of it in the moment when it needs to be addressed. Let me say that this is a middle book for sure. And Cassandra Clare has said that the last book, Chain of Thorns, is going to be lengthy and it's going to be a big book because it's a lot that has to be wrapped up. And Cassandra Clare does not skimp on wrapping up these things. So she gives you the time that you need to get through all these things. Okay. So where to start? I'm frustrated. You have the death of characters. I'm frustrated that I never knew if I could trust that the person was in fact who they were, because we find out that Lilith came back. We find out that Magnus Bane was not Magnus Bane, that it was Lilith perpetrating to be him. We found out that the contract that Cordelia had with Wayland, who forged Cortana, where she thought that she became the paladin for him, she was not. That was Lilith as well. So now she is, basically anytime she picks up a sword and she wields and fights, she is the paladin for Lilith because she swore fealty to Lilith unbeknownst to her. We see that there's a dynamic, a really sweet dynamic between Christopher and Grace, in that is the first time that Grace feels like she doesn't have to manipulate anybody, that Christopher in fact talks to her in a way that she really is interested in, and he is interested in her. So there's a little bit of a development there, but I don't think that I'll ever be able to forgive Grace. But at the same time, Tatiana is crazy. Tatiana, when Grace would have been about 11 years old, gave her a gift, and the gift that Tatiana had a warlock put on her is that Grace can manipulate men to make them do whatever she wants them to do. Okay, so you're going to take an 11-year-old girl to France, right? And you're going to have her interact with grown men and have them give her these lavish gifts to manipulate them to do what you want them to do? Are you crazy? Well, yes, we know you're crazy, but what is wrong with you? She's 11. So I feel like if they would have just addressed Tatiana in A Clockwork Princess, when she was expressed, when Gideon turned into the worm, the demon worm or whatever, if they would have just kept her in the Silent City or made her an Iron Sister or did whatever and didn't allow her to have her own. Why on earth would they ever allow her to adopt a child? Like, I want to look at the council and go like, what? You guys are Shadowhunters. You derive from angels. What is wrong with you? The decisions that you make are awful, hideous, terrible decisions. So that's how I feel about that. I feel like let me talk about James and Cordelia. The last scene in this book at the train station, I feel like he's left with a choice. Do you choose your sister and go and help her, or do you choose to intervene with Cordelia and Matthew? And of course, in that moment, he has to choose his sister because it's essential, because that's what's important, right? He needs to address it. But at the same time, I feel like Matthew is so broken and has so much going on. I feel like Cordelia is drawn to him because she wants to save him in a way that she was not able to save her father from alcoholism. But she feels in her young mind that it's good enough to say, if we go together, that drink, you just can't drink. And you're able to have a little bit of champagne and a little bit of wine, and that'll be good enough. And I just don't think it's going to end well. I'm really upset that Cordelia didn't stop and address and talk to James about, what she overheard when Grace came to the house. and give him an opportunity to explain. Like, she just picked up and ran off to Paris with Matthew. Like, I'm just mad at her about that. I'm mad at James, that James didn't address Grace, and that he allows her to hug him in the foyer of his house. She says, I'm gonna break off my marriage to Charles. He says, thank God, your wife is upstairs. Like, James, what are you doing? Like, I'd have been like, yo, bitch, stay right there. Cordelia, get down here. We need to talk. Like, da-da-da-da. Because at that point, it's revealed that he already knows that he was under a spell because the bracelet broke. And so he knew that she was manipulating him. So why would you have that conversation behind a locked door in your parlor when your wife is upstairs and not think that that's going to cause you problems? Like, that's the thing. James in this book reads so much younger than Will did in the Infernal Devices. Like, in the Infernal Devices, those characters seemed much more mature and much more able to address these things, whereas Will is just like, maybe because Tessa and Will babied James and Lucy so much that over here, and they say in the beginning of the book, and that was part of Belial's plan, right, is for them to be complacent and for them to like be weak because they never had circumstances to fight and battle demons and to develop this sense of like security, to develop this fighting ability and this ability to suss out danger and difficult situations. A lot of the characters over here put themselves in dangerous and deadly situations that could have been greatly avoided. I also want to talk about Thomas, Christopher, and Elias. I really love this. I love Charles is an asshole, and I love that Elias really gets and starts to understand that Elias is not that Charles is not a good person, but the things that Elias did in Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy really cemented and solidified his dynamic with the other characters in the book, especially with Matthew, because Matthew suffered the greatest. And I don't know that they're ever going to be able to forgive Elias, but I do see a potential hope for he and Thomas. One of my favorite parts of this book is the prison scene when Thomas and Elias are in the prison. I really love that. I thought it was beautiful, and I hope that it gets fleshed out a little bit more. I love Lucy's dynamic with Jesse. I feel like even though it's based on necromancy and it's based on him being dead, and we know necromancy is really frowned upon, but I love the dynamic there. I think that we start to see with Lucy, Grace, interaction with Malcolm Fade. You see the tie-in to the Dark Artifices with Annabelle Blackthorne. So that's really another Easter egg and another really nice dynamic. I love that there's a backstory that's going on in terms of who's committing the murders, who's killing the Shadowhunters, what is that all about, like, revealing that whole dynamic. So all in all, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 star. It stressed me out. The last chapter on the platform and the train station and the conversation with Grace and all of that, I was like, because you guys know I'm an audiobook listener, but I read as I am listening. I was like pacing and my heart was racing and I was angry and I was frustrated and I felt angsty and I felt all the feels and I loved it, and I couldn't sleep that night because I was just like, oh my God, what is this dynamic? Cassie, you did it to me again, this dynamic between Parabatai and the love interest with Cordelia and Matthew and James, and I saw it coming, but I didn't want to see it coming, and I was so frustrated, and I want James and Cordelia to be together, and I don't want them to have to go through all this dynamic, and they just could have resolved it if they just would have talked. So it was a lot. So I'm definitely looking forward to Chain of Thorns. I think Chain of Thorns is going to deliver in so many ways. I think it's going to be painful. I think it's going to be angsty. I am definitely going to reread this book. I think what I'm going to do is reread this book prior to the release. It comes out in March of 2022, The Chain of Thorns, if all goes well in the world and things don't go awry. I'm really excited for it. I'm really excited for the Black Book, the Book of the Dead. So I think that book is coming out. We've got the Wicked Powers, which is the conclusion of the Shadowhunter world. And then, like I said, we've got Chain of Thorns. So I don't know which order. Originally, it was supposed to be that we had the first book, the Wicked Powers, that was going to come out, and then we were going to get the third book in this, which is Chain of Thorns. I don't know if that publication order is going to be the same or not, or if it's going to be flipped. So we'll see. I am definitely telling you and giving you a heads up that once the books are out, I am going to read everything in publication order, because I absolutely love the world of the Shadowhunters, even though like I said, I like dark romance and I try to bring you all the smut and all the smut and all the smut. This series, if you haven't read it, it's outstanding. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It is a really fascinating and entertaining world of demons and angels and battles and, you know, love and intrigue. And it just gives everything and then some. But I have to say, I was really frustrated with this book. I was upset. I was angry. I had so many different emotions. I was confused. I was yelling at the characters. I wanted them to talk. Oh, and the other thing is Anna and Ariadne. And I just am like, Anna, what the hell are you doing? Like, I get that you're pissed off and that you're hurt that Ariadne hurt you. I get it. I understand. But she is trying her best. And now, at this point, you are creating hurt in Ariadne. So guess what, Anna? In Chain of Thorns, you need to step it up and you need to grovel and you need to fix what you've done with Ariadne. Because she made some mistakes and she did some things that were hurtful, but so did you. And so now we need it resolved, and you need to be the one who steps up and fixes it, you know? And so I feel like there's going to be a lot of, in the next book in Chain of Thorns, I'm not going to say groveling, but there's going to have to be some things that are going to have to be resolved. Matthew, you are not the same parabatai that Jem was to Will. And how dare you think that you are doing the right thing by stepping up and saying, Cordelia, I love you, and therefore, as a result of the love I have for you, I'm going to take you off to Paris, and we're going to forget because it's a place of forgetting, and then I'm going to woo you. Like, how dare you? That is not what a parabatai does. And if you are, in fact, being a parabatai to Will, you would have never done that. You would have helped him resolve it. So I just think you're a shitty parabatai. Now, I don't say that I don't love you, Matthew. I know that you've been through a lot. And the fact that James steps up and says, I've been terrible because for the past 4 years of my life, since I was 14 years old, I've been manipulated by this curse that Grace put on me. And so I've missed things that I should have seen. And if I would have seen them, I would have been able to better help you. And that's why I love James so much, because it's not all his fault and it's not all his responsibility. You know, there are a lot of forces at work that are against everyone around them. But for the Shadowhunters as a whole, for people that are set to protect the world from all the ills and evils in the world, I'm just like, you guys are a bunch of dense, difficult, arrogant, angsty, high and mighty kind of people, race of people that feel like you're just so much better than everybody else. And in fact, the things and the choices that the Shadowhunters makes me kind of go like, how dare you? Are you even worthy of carrying the sword? Right? Like the mortal sword. Like, are you worthy of it? Because many times some of the things that you do just makes me go like, I don't think that you're worthy of the position and the power and the responsibility. To whom much is given, much is required. And I don't think that you oftentimes display Jem-like qualities, because Jem is up there for me. Anyway, I have rambled and rambled and rambled some more. If you haven't read them, please do. I really think that if you like demons, if you like angels, if you like love triangles, if you like platonic love, if you want angst, if you want to be shocked, if you like picking through and finding connections and dynamics and Easter eggs and finding like details. Cassandra Clare puts a roadmap, but the roadmap is hidden and some of it's fleshed out and right there for the taking, and others you're going to be like, ooh, I know this. This goes over here. Like, if you like that, these books are absolutely there for you, and I think you will appreciate it and love it and then some. And so, and I'm going to say, if you're Game of Thrones fans, then you will absolutely love. Different genre, but the same with Game of Thrones, where we had to pick through and weed through and see connections and see where things scheming and see where the plot points were. And this Cassandra Clare builds a world for us in much the same way. I have said a lot. You guys, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and come and hang out with me more. I will have more book recommendation videos for you on Friday. And so that's all I got for today. So I look forward to seeing you. And you know, I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye, guys.